Hello watch enthusiasts. Now today I'd like to talk about the best redesigns of wristwatches, the best overhauls if you will. And these we've seen on many watches from Rolexes through to Omegas and other brands, where the brand has taken an older model and redesigned it in a modern form for today. And in this video I'm only going to be including watches which have been redesigned for today. So for example the Omega Speedmaster 300M wouldn't really fit because that was a redesign many years ago, in the early 90s, and hasn't really been redesigned since. But there are certainly some very interesting watches which have been inspired by older models in the range, but haven't become heritage models which pay homage to older models, but rather modern versions which move into the future in an interesting and novel way, but while carrying subtle touches from the past. Now the first watch which I'd like to talk about is the new Omega Globemaster, and this is a watch which I think is very interesting, because it harks back to days gone by when pan-pi dials were commonly available and commonly seen on watches, but in this case with a touch of refinement and a brushed finish which gives the watch an entirely new take, really. Of course, the new version comes in several different metals, from stainless steel through to gold, and in my opinion, they're all very, very tastefully done because of this brushed finish with these polished bevels, which adds certain refinement to the watch. In addition to this, the execution of the dial is really a masterful touch, and this is because it's done in this pipe hand design, which is of course very reminiscent of the older versions of this watch, but nonetheless has a very modern aesthetic due to the sunburst style on the dial, and in combination with those lume plots to give the whole watch a legibility which the originals didn't have. Equally, the hands are matchingly lumed and polished with a bevel down the middle, giving the hands a very crisp look. Also, the applied indices add to the unified modern aesthetic this watch has. In fact, even the bezel, that beautifully fluted bezel, suits this watch very, very nicely, which gives sort of a slightly older air to this watch, but while remaining very crisp and modern due to its very small divots. Equally, the case shape itself, in its blocky modernity in combination with that subtle brushing and polishing, takes the watch to a far more contemporary design than previous models, which had small jutting out lugs, whereas here you have a flowing line down the side of the watch. Equally, when discussing this watch, one really cannot ignore the movement which has been placed inside this watch, and the fact that the movement is very much designed with this watch. Of course, the movement is the new Co-Axial master chronometer movement made by Omega, and this is their most accurate automatic movement, and certainly is a marvel to behold, with that very modern, again modern is the returning theme here, design on the movement, with that 15,000 Gauss anti-magnetism rating, and equally the high level of certification with regards to the timekeeping of this watch. For example, the movement is tested before being placed into the watch at several angles, then redone when inside the watch, just to ensure optimum timekeeping. Of course, in combination with the Co-Axial technology, which of course renders this watch capable of lasting much longer between services due to the nature of the Daniels Co-Axial escapement, one has an incredible movement, really, at a fairly reasonable price for this watch, I feel, considering the finishing and the craftsmanship. Next we have the IWC Big Pilot, and this is a watch which has interested me for a long time because of its design and the way it's been updated over the years by IWC. Now, of course, the design of the Big Pilot is a 1940s design, fundamentally, of the ideal pilot's watch for the armed forces, when they needed a watch which was very legible at a glance. However, I think what's been created here over the years is a far more versatile watch due to the clever design that IWC has put into this watch. Now, when one looks at a lot of Flieger watches, they often resemble each other due to the very fact that they were commissioned by military bodies in order to be standard, or at least to work to the standard given by the the various regulations to which the companies producing the watches had to adhere. And a lot of watches are produced still to that standard in order to look more vintage or more classically inspired. What I love here, though, is that IWC has taken the inspiration of its classical pilot's watch, with that fantastically legible dial and those legible sword hands, and brought it into the 21st century. Now, in order to achieve a more modern appeal to this watch, IWC have taken the various features which this watch originally had, which were so typical of these watches, such as those sword hands, and then brought them into the 21st century. So, for example, these hands have been painted black to better match the dial, and to bring out a more crisp, modern appeal. Equally, the numerals on the dial are very modern in their design, and highly legible. Also, the addition of the fantastic in-house movement of this watch, with that 7-day power reserve, double direction winding system, and free-sprung balance, to give the whole watch functionality which it wouldn't have had back in the day. However, the watch does still pay homage to the past through that interesting sign at 12 o'clock, which of course showed 12 o'clock very clearly on a lot of pilots' watches in the past. And equally, that onion crown harks back to the days when this watch was a pure pilot's watch, and needed pure functionality. Equally, the size has been reduced to 46mm, which makes it altogether more wearable than the original 55. And though that may seem large, they've worked wonders with the lugs and the strap to make it more comfortable. Equally, the very coloration of the watch is very crisp and modern in that almost monochromatic look, apart from that little red, a little splash of red on the power reserve indicator, which I think was a very, very nice touch. Equally, the date has been placed at 6 o'clock to give the whole watch a far more uniform look, and a look which is more in keeping with more modern aesthetics. Equally, the case design itself has been changed, so the lugs have been widened, and the line along the side of the case has been smoothed, to give a more flowing design, while also emphasising the size of this watch and its nature as a pilot's watch. Equally, the more harsh aesthetic of a bead-blasted case, which was often the design format which was given to the original Fliegers as no-nonsense military watches, has been replaced by this beautiful concentric brushing, which I think adds a great deal of depth to this watch and size as well to the shape of this watch. It also serves to curve that edge on the end of the lugs into a nice circle, which I think is very appealing to the eye. Of course, in addition to this design, the movement is also in keeping with modern standards, so it keeps time very, very well due to its high beat nature, or at least higher beat than previous IWC calibers. Equally, it has a free-sprung balance wheel to improve shock resistance and avoid time deviation due to shocks. It also, as I mentioned earlier, has a double direction winding system, which just adds a more refined aesthetic and a more refined design really to the movement. Equally, that power reserve is a fantastic feature and demonstrates another feature of this movement, which is, of course, that 7-day power reserve, which really is a fantastic thing and certainly does add to the functionality of this watch. Finally, the various versions of this watch in blue, for example, with these beautifully finished sunburst dials, do add a more playful aesthetic to this very classic design of a pilot's watch, and make the watch altogether more playful in its design. Now, this, I believe, really does add to the value of this watch in terms of redesigns, because it shows that IWC is moving away from the classical military design and more into a more varied and more interesting pilot's watch for the modern world. Now, I was going to include the new Cerachrom Rolex Daytona, which I think has really modernised the design. But nonetheless, I think there's one Rolex which outdoes it in terms of being a successful overhaul of a watch. When the Daytona was fantastic in its modernisation, but still retained those very 90s hour markers around the dial, which I think detract from the modernity and the redesign of this watch. Therefore, if I have to select one Rolex which has been modernised more than all others, and successfully so, it has to be the new ceramic Submariner. This is a watch which has had a very clever redesign in order to make the whole watch look more modern and fit better with the modern world. Of course, even starting at the clasp, it has the new fantastic glide lock clasp, which, though not technically as good as the one on the Sea Dweller, due to the fact that it doesn't have a direct dive extension, but nonetheless a fantastic overhaul, and one which really has has improved the original pressed and stamped clasp, which always left a bit to be desired. With regards to the watch itself, that bezel is a great place to start. Of course, it's been redesigned in ceramic to make it more scratch resistant and more resilient in this modern world, rather than the original painted insert. It also has that beautiful lustrous finish due to its polished finish. I think this emphasises the fact that the 904L stainless steel the watch is made of, even in its brushed form, is very, very shiny, shinier than normal 316L due to the fact that it's extremely hard, so one can actually work a very, very good finish into its surface. Equally, that case has been widened at the lugs to make the watch closer to 42mm at some points than the original 40. Equally, the crown guards have been made more, elongated, if you will, along the side of the watch, to add a strengthened and generally harder look to the watch. Now, it could very well be argued that this watch has lost a bit of its romanticism in the progress of this development, but I think many others would argue that this watch has been modified for the better, away from that more archaic design which was the case on the older models, into a new phase for the Submariner. Equally, the dial has been redesigned too to have a very shiny finish, if you will, to its surface, and while retaining that dark look which the black Submariner has always had. In addition to that, the lume now is that bright blue lume which can be seen on all Rolex models now, all Rolex models with lume, of course. And it certainly does add a certain legibility, and again, it goes back to that crisp, modern look which this watch takes, away from that more romantic and classic look of the old Submariner. Equally, this lume does return to the original purpose of this watch, as a highly functional dive watch, and here this lume does improve the legibility immensely, really, for divers, and really does make it better at its job. Of course, the lume plots here have also been enlarged and made into a maxi dial, where the various lume plots and markers have been enlarged in relation to the older ones, which were much, much smaller. Equally, the hands have had a redesign and increase in size to add area for that lume. Of course, that superlative chronometer writing on the dial now actually means something, with a far more accurate movement with various interesting technologies in order to make this watch a better watch in general. This watch does, of course, have the Rolex 3135 movement, and this is an automatic self-winding movement with a chronometer certification which goes beyond really what would normally be done for a COSC watch. So you have this very tight certification for this watch for its daily timekeeping, which is really excellent to see on this watch, and does show that Rolex is progressing with its movements. Equally, it does have the parachrom hairspring, which does allow better shock resistance and better resistance to temperature variation, which is again practical for this watch as a sports watch. Now, another watch which has been fantastically overhauled to produce a modern offering which is inspired by the classic but has far more features and also executes those individually better. This is, of course, the Omega Speedmaster Dark Side of the Moon. And this is, of course, an interesting watch because it takes inspiration from the original Moonwatch, the 41.5mm manually wound chronograph watch to reach the moon, but then brings it into the 21st century. And I think some would argue that a better choice for this would perhaps have been the normal Co-Axial, which was really the base for this watch. But I think the Dark Side of the Moon has done a better job of popularising the Moonwatch among people who perhaps wouldn't have considered it previously. So this is why I think this watch is very influential in terms of being a major update to the Moonwatch line. Of course, this takes its inspiration from the original Moonwatch in terms of its case design, its protection for its pushers and crown, but is then entirely made out of zirconium dioxide ceramic, which is extremely hard and very, very scratch resistant. This has also popularised this watch with a great number of people, and has actually led more people to buy the original Professional too. Of course, this does also house the coaxial chronometer movement of Omega, which is the fantastic the new version at least has the new anti-magnetic version of this, which is also highly shock resistant and is equally very, very accurate. It's a certified chronometer. Now, of course, the case of this watch has been enlarged from 41.5mm to 44.25. And this is a large increase, but due to the fairly short lug-to-lug distance of this watch, and the fairly narrow lugs altogether, this watch is comfortable for most people, that enables a wider tachymeter and a larger dial to make the whole watch more legible. Equally, I feel this ceramic version of this watch has really, as well as inspiring many people with the Moonwatch sort of bug, if you will, this watch has also shown that Omega is willing to progress in terms of its watches and its case materials, if ceramic is a more versatile material. Now, of course, various versions of the Seamaster Planet Ocean have actually been produced in ceramic too, but I believe these have had less poignance in terms of a redesign, because the Planet Ocean was already quite a novel watch for the 2000s and doesn't really have much in common with the original Seamaster, whereas I think the Moonwatch has become an icon and remained so, due to perhaps the fact that NASA have been so obstinate about not renovating the Moonwatch, about leaving it the way it is, because, of course, to them what isn't broken shouldn't be fixed. Equally, this redesign is very much in line with the space age association of this watch as being at the forefront of technology, and it certainly is with this ceramic case and ceramic pushes and crown as well. Equally, that dial is ceramic too, just adding to this non-metal aspect of this watch, which is so famed and interesting. Of course, the manner in which the movement has been displayed on this watch is also tremendous, and has actually been implemented on various other professionals, notably the Sapphire Sandwich, just out of the success of these Co-Axial watches. Of course, this is also seen on the non-ceramic version of this watch, and on the various other colours of ceramic. But I just think that the black ceramic version has been so successful that it really couldn't be neglected or ignored. Equally, this watch does actually feature elements which weren't available on the original watch, notably the date, which is a functional item which most watches do have. I think that here it was ignored for many years due to the nature of the movement, but here actually it's been added, which I think was a very nice addition from Omega. And also the dial's been cleared up with that bicompax design, with two hands on the right-hand one, in order to enable the watch to have a cleaner design and look altogether more modern and more refined. Anyway, I shall end there and finish the video here, due to the fact that I think these really are the watches which I think have the most interesting and best executed redesign of a very classic design. Something which was iconic but was redone by the brand. And admittedly, most of these watches, well, in fact all of them were luxury products, but the reason for that is that for the most part the various less expensive watches don't have access to such well-rounded redesigns. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and do please like, share and subscribe if you did enjoy the video. Also, please leave your comments in the comment section down below about what you think should have made the list, and your thoughts on my choices. So thank you very much for watching. This is Arm on the Watch Guy, over and out.